everybody. Here we are for the next installment of the Dragonfly Paradigm Lunchtime Book Club. Again, not live due to internet issues, but will be uploaded onto YouTube on the channel there, so you can access this and all the previous discussions as well. I'm in a new location today, just downstairs in my office. My daughter is on her last couple of days of remote school, so we're counting down the minutes here. So gonna get this done, and I can't believe that we're already halfway through this book. It's been intense for sure. A lot of science to it, which can be tough to digest sometimes, and needing to do more research just to understand what Dr. Perry's talking about. But this particular chapter, for chapter 5, connecting the dots, there was a lot of information, but I really feel that there's just one main theme that's going through this, and that is the concept of what he terms transmissibility. He defines it on page 129 as the way to describe the ability of a trait or skill or belief to be passed on from one person to another. He continues on page 130 that the language we speak, the beliefs we hold, both good and bad, are passed from generation to generation through experience. And really for me, this brought up kind of this one overall sort of memory or experience from my childhood, specifically with my mother, and the way that she passed down to me her ways of dealing with people. And just to elaborate a little bit, she said it was okay that I shared this. Made sure to ask her first, but as a child, my mother was bullied quite a lot due to being overweight. And she has shared with me over the years how she developed kind of a hardened attitude to shield herself from being hurt by people. And then thinking back over my own experience and my behavior with others, I too developed what I like to call a suit of armor that I would put on whenever I was going to go to a new place, being around new people, and so on. But in that, one thing that I realized after reading this chapter was that my mother not only taught me how to protect myself from being hurt, but she also inadvertently taught me to be distrustful of people. I tend to look at people as always having an ulterior motive and always being a source of potential threat or hurt to me. So a lot of times people will, say to me after I've met them or we spend some time together, not necessarily that I'm nicer, but my guard is down. I'm not preparing for the possibility of an incoming insult or rejection, that I kind of, loosen up or drop that armor a bit. Skipping ahead onto page 145, Dr. Perry explains kind of this process I would go through quite perfectly. He says that in every person-to-person interaction, there are complex calculations going on in each person's brain. Is this person safe? Are they an ally or an enemy? Will they hurt me or help me? What are they planning to do? What are they trying to do? What do they want? This relational calculus helps define where we are in a power differential. If we feel we are equal, that means I don't feel threatened. If I am dominant, means I am safe. They are dominant, means I am vulnerable. He calls this process relational calculus, and I think that's perfect. I really like that phrase because to me it explains the constant assessments I do each and every time I'm in a social situation. And I think that if we all took some time as we were reading this chapter to think about our own interactions with others, we are doing some form of this mental process all the time. And for those of us that have suffered trauma resulting from bullying, teasing, rejection, etc., we're constantly on alert all the time, trying to be sure that we are not going to be a target. So, understanding how my mother's transmission of her fears of being hurt were passed down to me, this will now allow me to be more mindful of how I address the issue with my own child. On page 132, Dr. Perry elaborates by saying that if we want to enrich the transmission of humane, compassionate values, beliefs, and practices, and minimize the transmission of hateful, destructive beliefs, we need to be very mindful of what we are exposing our child or children to. It's definitely going to be a challenge for me to not pass down to my daughter my automatic assumptions of, skepticism of others. But the first step is being aware that that is what I'm doing. And as Dr. Perry asked at the bottom of page 132, are we being as mindful as we could? And that's a question we need to ask ourselves often. And when we feel we are reacting to a current situation based upon past traumas, we need to press pause. As Oprah says on page 124 and 125, having the tools and understanding to step back and observe what I'm feeling allows me to then choose how to move through the fear, and that will be a game changer. And as we practice this process of putting a small moment of space between the immediate feeling and our instinctive reaction, we are allowing ourselves to stay present and regain control. And I think that's really something to kind of sit and think on and let it kind of, get into your psyche, that just taking a little moment and, pressing pause and recognizing, wait a minute, am I, authentically reacting to the situation, or am I bringing my years of past trauma into this? I think at one point Dr. Perry mentions that our lower brain, it can't tell time. And he uses the example of the PTSD veteran, from a couple of chapters before, to illustrate that when that individual heard the fireworks, it made him, immediately react like he was still, in an active fighting environment, because the lower brain that initially takes in that information, it doesn't have the ability to tell time or to be like, hey, this isn't happening now, that's from years ago. That process takes a lot longer to get into the cortex. So just having that kind of wherewithal and recognition of ourselves to just stop for a minute, ask ourselves, what's going on here? Are we being as mindful as we could be? Those kinds of things will help us. And although this chapter, at least for me, had just the one main theme of transmissibility, I think it's extremely important. Recognizing what beliefs our parents and grandparents passed down to us, good and bad, will allow us to break the cycle and stop the transmission of negative, hateful, and fearful attitudes and beliefs onto the next generation. So, there you have it. Short and sweet this week, but I think it's a good topic to take the time and, for this next week, think about when you're feeling that way. Practice the stop, pressing pause, recognizing what's going on, and then make the choice to change your reaction based on what's really happening and not from the past trauma. So, with that, I will see you next week for Chapter 6, and I hope you all have a great day.